humanity began expanding as soon as the ancient technologies that they had before were finally brought to the surface. Mixing those with current technologies, humans changed from very simple creatures that they were to another species entirely. Always able to stay at peak condition due to the old and new technologies, allowing them to do just amazing things compared to what they were doing originally. They utilized electromagnetic, anti-gravitic quantum flux engines that propelled them not only across their world but up into the stars, and they began to expand fast, incredibly fast, faster than any other species thought possible. As they reached out into the stars, it became well known that any human could rebuild, improve, tweak out, or just simply create better ships on the fly. They also began to adjust themselves due to certain aesthetics that they wanted. They adjust themselves to be better at what they did due to the technology at the time and to what they wanted to do. If they wanted to explore through the ocean of space, they adjust their bodies so that they could more easily handle zero gravity. If they wanted to build, be somebody with construction, they possibly gave themselves an extra arm, maybe a tentacle or two, or maybe a tail just so they could hold on. Some decided that they would grow and raise different animals, which means they had to be very strong. They looked like what used to be known as elementals from fiction, as many of these farmers were now just gargantuans, standing many times about 3 meters, sometimes 4 meters tall. This allowed them to throw all the different equipment, move it in different areas, and easily manhandle whichever beast was giving them trouble. If they wanted to create, they were able to extend their minds, allowing them to see into realms that they didn't even know was possible, so that they could actually design things that were not designed yet. They could improve things beyond anyone's measure. They also allowed for more dexterity and more feel to the fingers, better eyesight, and things of that. If they wanted to simply expand and live on a certain planet, then they could adjust themselves, changing the lungs, changing the blood, changing whatever they needed to make sure that they could simply survive. When they located other species out in the void, there was limited trade. Not because neither side had nothing to trade with, no. They really didn't have anything that the other one wanted. Mainly, the trade was due to different cultures. They would integrate with each other and learn about each other. There was also a few border disputes, but those were rare as space is vast. Very, very vast. So, fighting over borders was rare, usually settled in the courts with the lawyers. Very late in this expansion, the human colony on the second planet of the Omega Sector actually began in earnest as the humans actually landed all their own personal transport ships onto the planet itself. Unknown to them, as they began to start to have their society, working with agriculture, mining, and different things, that another species, a sentient species, already occupied this planet. What they had not known is a long time ago, a ship had crashed from a species that had actually lost a war. These survivors managed to actually make it to the surface, even though their ship didn't quite totally crash, but more like crash landed, and making it possible for them to survive. And once they got on the planet, they began to thrive, even though they basically lived a Stone Age existence for a while, relying basically on the technology they had of the ship, but the technology, well, if they couldn't repair it, it went away. They stayed hidden from the humans for almost 2 full solar rotations from the time the humans landed. When they were discovered, the ones the humans found were just a couple of kids that looked scared out of their mind, one of which was even bleeding when they found them, were absolutely horrified when the humans actually reached up and tried to help them, but immediately after hearing the screams, they backed away, tried to calm them down. Those that were found, these children, didn't know what the humans were saying, but the humans were actually trying to describe them. They were saying how They look like dark elves, all of them with charcoal black skin, large ears that seem to independently move, and more feline type of a nose than human, that's for sure. As they watched these kids move around, it was clear that the only hair they had was on their head and on their tail, both of which were also solid black. At first, most of the humans that found them believed that these young ones must have been maybe just born, maybe they didn't have enough food, and they were sent out into the world to die as they were just extra mouths to feed. Then they realized these weren't young, they're just small compared to a human. As they finally got these creatures to relax a little bit, to come out, coaxing them mainly with food, they realized that these dark elves, whatever they were, had 3 fingers on each hand and hooved feet. The kids were absolutely horrified when the humans stood up as they simply towered over these young ones. Yet seeing all this fear, it seems the humans decided to treat them more like dogs, once again dropping down to a knee, holding out a hand, and simply waiting for these creatures to come to them. It would be another full solar rotation of this world before the new species was even talked about beyond the planet itself. They talked about how first the children were treated for their injuries, fed, given some blankets, and then the kids simply seemed to thank them and left. They simply took the gift and were gone. Humans didn't mind so much. It was a small colony, but they had plenty. They didn't need to be stingy. However, they should have figured that it wasn't long, about a week's time, before the adults of this same species made themselves known. They all walked up, seemingly not even caring that these humans were actually much larger than they are, much wider, clearly. They looked over and they pointed at the translator itself. It seems like they knew what it was, and thankfully, after speaking into it, the translator figured out the language very, very quickly. Soon after being able to communicate, the adults were able to sit down after a good meal and talk about their history. As it turns out, these creatures, these dark elf-looking things, are called the Tamok, and they explained that they had a war with another species called the Muggets. Every human knew about the Muggets, as Muggets were very territorial, and they actually lived up to their name, as they looked actually like minotaurs. Well, at least the males did. The females looked a bit more human, which is why the Muggets, the first time, actually thought they could actually simply grab a human female and take them away for activities. Nobody seemed to like them much, but after this cultural difference was acknowledged, they didn't allow females around anymore. The Muggets didn't either, as they're a very closed society as it is. During the battle with the Muggets, the Tamok were completely outgunned, and they fought back as best they could, but they lost. They didn't just lose the battle. They lost the war, and they lost their homeworld. And showing an image of it, it now looks like Mars. After a while, the ship came down and tried to land, but it crashed onto the ground, and it was absolutely full of refugees. Thankfully, they were able to camouflage the ship itself by putting rocks all over it, making it look like part of the landscape. However, it was unable to take off again due to the heavy landing, and they just didn't have the parts to replace it with. Due to the fact they had to stay here, they learned to survive. And once they learned how to survive on the planet by hunting, by fishing, by harvesting, by foraging, they thrived. And they've been thriving quite well, even due to the high mortality rate due to limited medical care. Eventually, the Tamok actually asked the colonists for mercy. They actually dropped down onto their knees, laid their hands way out, and forced their foreheads to the ground, begging for mercy for their own kind, hoping the humans wouldn't come and take them for their own pleasure, for their own food. They begged for mercy. And that's when all the humans looked and said, "We have no interest in doing that. Seriously, that would be just no. No, that's not going to happen." Realizing that they didn't actually have to beg for mercy and it was just going to be given, That's when they begged for something else: sanctuary. They feared that the Muggets would return, and if they saw the humans there, the Muggets might land, and if they did, they would be discovered and they would be completely obliterated. The decision didn't come easy. There was a lot of different debate back and forth. However, once everything was said and done, it was decided to section off 75% of the planet for the Tamok because, well, they were here first. They were here. This was actually their planet. Humans were visitors. After this was struck, Omega 2 is being developed, and it got developed pretty well, mainly thanks to the high amount of robots being used by the humans. It seemed as though that not only genetic mutations, but AI was being used to its nth degree if they could. They used the robots mainly for mining, for timber, mainly for the most dangerous work, and they were never, ever wasted. This was exceptionally shown when the Tamok actually showed up for a little bit of trade, bringing some foodstuffs, and they were absolutely surprised seeing humans standing around a fire. They seemed to be grieving, paying homage to something, and the Tamok were amazed that they were holding this for one of their own robots, one that had served them very well, and for a long time. It got caught in an actual cave-in, and unfortunately, even its own quantum computer could not be saved. This was something that the humans took very seriously. The Tamok actually had begun trading with the humans and quickly began to repair their ship. They would trade goods, usually foodstuffs, for the technology they needed, not only for their ship, but for their own hygiene, for their own medical, and so on. They began building out, creating an actual city for once. And with the arrival of more food and the ability to actually work with the Tamok, humanity started building out, building their farms, building their ranches, which meant more food, which meant more jobs, which meant more humans arrived. Omega 2, for humanity, was very far out, way off in the boonies, and that's exactly why most of, if not all, of the humans that lived there wanted. They wanted to get away. They wanted to fly away. On the surface, there was not only trade relations, but as it turned out, there was actual relations between the two species. Yet this was exceptionally rare, usually by those who grew up next to each other, and, well, things happen. Any human, though, that believed they could just arrive on Omega 2 and take advantage of the Tamok because the Tamok were smaller and easier to handle, well, the fate that awaited the one or two that tried to do this is very gruesome. As what happens is once they're caught, and they will be caught as they will not be able to leave the planet once they find out that this crime has happened, the perpetrator is located, captured, their ligaments and tendons are severed, and they're still very much alive, and they're simply given to the victim. The perpetrator's life is now in the victim's hands along with their family, and they can choose how to punish this perpetrator. In this regard, it's clear to the Tamok that humans have no chill in this regard, especially since they solved this problem a long time ago with the extensive use of what they call house bots. Bots that are used not just to clean up a domicile and make your meals, but also for extracurricular activities. They've been in use since the early 21st century human time, so there is no reason to commit said crimes. Omega 2 turns out to be a very peaceful location. A location where everyone on the planet is armed, which also makes them polite. As they say, an armed society is a polite society. And even though it was originally designated as a Class 3 death world, due to the fact that there is toxic flora on the planet, there is extremely dangerous megafauna that would make an hippo look at and go, nope. And there is slight seismic activity. However, due to the seismic activity being so light that it hardly even registered on their instruments, it seems as though the planet was actually about to be brought down to a level 2 death world. Or, if things keep going, it's going to be reclassified as an aggro world, which if any colony can actually pull this off officially, it is one hell of a coup for them. That was the plan until exactly one local year to the day that the Tamok were actually exposed to the public, declared that they were the owners of 3/4 of the planet. That's the day that a battle group of Muggets actually arrived. When they did, they were immediately asked, "What are your intentions?" The answer they got back, "We demand the eradication of the Tamok. Failure to hand over all of them will result in each territory of the Tamok being glassed and the rest of the planet searched." "You have no authority here," a human voice screamed out. "This area is protected by the Terran Coalition, and you know what that means." "Omega-2 and the rest of the systems are independent. We are not targeting humans directly. Your laws do not apply." "No, you're just threatening every creature on this planet. That makes it our business, because this is our planet too." "This is going to happen regardless of your stance, human. You have until we reach the planet to evacuate your personnel, and be advised we will be searching your ships and take whatever we desire." Hearing this, the Tamok leader, an old man that was actually made young again thanks to human tech, said, "This is our war, not yours. This ship, now that it has been repaired, carries some impressive weapons." The human governorship said, "Yeah, maybe 200 years ago it was impressive, but not anymore. Things have changed. I'm going to tell you, things have changed a lot." The Tamok governor himself said, "Well, we may fight and die, but we die free." Sensors around the planet go nuts as the ship itself struggles to take off. It seems as though the repairs, even done systematically, are barely enough to get a ship that size off a planet this large. "We shall fight this battle alone. This is our war, not yours." "To hell you are," said one voice over the radio. "This is PT-109 Razor Fist. Stand in defiance of your claim, Muget." "You can't." "This is PT-626 Shark Tank. I stand in defiance of your claim." "A few personal ships from the humans? Surely you..." "This is PT-1775 Lexington. This is PT-1815 Waterloo. This is PT-480 Thermopylae. This is PT-1709 Poltava. This is PT-1683 Vienna." And a cacophony of voices filled the area to proclaim their personal craft as they all joined the line as the massive turret ship finally breaks from the ground and reaches up towards the exosphere. When they do, they find a vast armada of human personal transports simply waiting, and even more coming around the planet joining in. The commander of the turret ship said, "I told you, this is our battle. We are meant to stand alone." The response was swift from the lead ship. "You stand with us, you never stand alone." "Attention all ships. This is former Command Sergeant Major Plumley from PT-109. I am assuming command of all human forces. Form up on my ping." Sends out signal. "As you can see, Muggets, we defy your claim. Stand down and exit the solar system. Do this, and we will not destroy your entire fleet." The Mugget respond with, "Your paltry few will not stand against our might, nor our will. You choose to defend those creatures, then you will perish with them." "You all heard this, asshole. All ships, arm weapons. Get targeting solution. One ship, one weapon, or one torpedo. Lock 'em up." He sends a message out. "Muggets, this is your final warning." The response was, "No, human, it's yours." Without waiting another moment, all everybody heard over the comms was, "Torpedoes away!" That was when a wall of torpedoes from every single human ship was firing. Some firing 2, others firing 4, but all of them firing. Then the order came in, charge the cannons now and fire at will. The PT boats accelerate as fast as they can, seeming to chase the torpedoes, keeping pace as best they can, and they're using the torpedoes as shields and decoys, which means if the enemy is firing at them, they can't fire at the boats, and the boats can get close and use their direct fire weapons. Due to their size, they can get close and use their speed as well and maneuverability as their advantage. As they start getting closer, they all fire a second volley of torpedoes, and now there's 2 different walls of death heading towards the Muget's. The Muget ships begin to counter, but the torpedoes are heavily armored on the front, and this allows them to reach their targets, not to mention they're armor piercing. So when they hit their target, they're going to penetrate as deep as they can, forcing that ship to buckle and bend its back, arching itself before they burst off inside, exploding so hard that it seems they're going to break the back of that ship. Just as the human ships make contact and do their first pass, all they hear from the Mugets is, "Humans, get clear!" That's when the Tamok main guns fire into the enemy formation. They truly were impressive for their time, however only marginally effective now. Yet still, they are effective, especially with the enemy so concerned with the human PT boats swarming all around them, ducking, diving, and dodging all the time, emptying magazines into the enemy weapons, making them explode as they're the most volatile section. They would strafe the engines, forcing the ship to either turn or simply go limp and just hang there in space waiting to get blasted. And of course, the primary target, the bridge. Always aiming at the bridge. You're always closing in, always trying to take them out. The Muget's battle cruisers begin to fail as the relentless assault continues. The Mugets can do nothing but watch as one of the battle cruisers sparks and then explodes, spraying all the ships around it with shrapnel large enough to tear even more ships apart. And now, the far right flank of the Mugets has failed. Despite their losses, the human ships still move around so fast it's difficult for any turret to even track them. They're always dragging Muget torpedoes and missiles behind them whenever they're targeted. Sometimes they're able to take out a ship by themselves just by diving straight towards one of the other Muget ships while a missile is trailing closer and closer, getting closer, and then they just go right past the Muget ship, dive or pull up as hard as they can, forcing the targeting computer to aim right into the hull of the Mugets, a lot of times blowing their faces completely off. However, this means, if you look at it, the Mugets just shot themselves. I mean, they were trying to shove a torpedo up the human ship's butt, which means they were trying to screw it, and now they screwed themselves. Interesting way of looking at it. When a second battle cruiser is completely crippled, this time by the Tamok ship, the Muget battle group pulls back, begins to withdraw, and tries to get away as fast as they can, but the humans, they're not letting them. As though desperate to take out as many lives as possible, these PT boats press the assault until the Muget ships try to jump away. Many of them are too disabled and can't jump. Many times the jump engines fail and they simply either fail and fall to pieces or they simply explode. In one case, the engine simply shuts off and they're left there drifting in space. The battle is over at this point. The results, 66% loss to human ships with 39% casualties. The Tamok ship was actually barely engaged as it was only using its main guns to reach out and fuck someone up. Yet, they will stay in orbit for a while, as not only do they have to help collect casualties, but they can't land yet. It was decided that they will actually stay up until a new mooring is actually constructed, one that will allow them to settle the ship down so it can be worked on in earnest, so they now have a true flagship. The Tamok captain was in contact with one of the humans as his own personal craft when he said, "They're gone. We're safe." The human responded with a death glare into the screen. They're gone, sure, but they'll be back. They always come back. Realizing the depth of the words and the piercing gaze in the man's eyes, the Tamok captain said, "Well, what do we do? Do we run then?" The human then seemed to grin a little bit. A strange human custom that seemed to scare everybody, where they just show a little bit of their fangs, but never showing all of them. The human captain said, "Nah, we do what anyone does during the lull in the fighting. We prepare for the next one. Only this time, we're going to have some assistance." The Tamok were actually surprised because just a moment later, their sensors started pinging that there was FTL jumps on the other side of the planet, but they're coming in. They started to read on the display, and dozens of human ships are jumping in, most being personal transport, PT boats, along with a single human battleship, 4 destroyers, 1 cruiser, and 6 frigates. The Tamok leader couldn't understand what was going on. His jaw actually opened wide as he was taken out of his own mind for a second. However, their executive officer said, "What are they doing here?" The humans simply smiled fully this time. "Oh, they came looking for a fight. Besides, I told you before, you're not alone. Besides, like it was stated long ago, I thought I told you about this. There's an old human phrase, 'He who shed his blood with me shall be my brother.' And since you're kind of our younger kin, our little brothers and sisters is kind of how we look at you, that means they made 2 big mistakes. One of them was messing with our kin. You don't do that." The captain finally got back to his own senses and said, "Well, if that is the biggest or big mistake, what is the other mistake?" The human once again grinned slyly. He said, "Oh, they messed with our boats." Hello everybody, this is Syntax. Thank you for joining me today on this short story. And before I go, I need to send out some big thank yous to some of my supporters, and those will be Prozac and Pancakes, SS Demon, MTF Guard, Brian Kemp, Julius Boone, Douglas Scarborough, Erica Gem, and Guardian Sage. Thank you all so much for supporting the channel. Everybody else, I'll see you on the next one. This is Syntax, punching out.